Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Eric Karpinski on the line. Eric, how are you?
I'm doing great, Mike. Thank you for having me. This is looking forward to having this conversation.
Yeah, I am too. And as we said in the pre-show, you are doing some amazing work and have done for quite some time. That's really needed right now in this world of pandemics and working from home and stress and all the negativity that is really easy to find, because I think unfortunately a lot of people look for it. But we're going to talk about the positive side of things. So share with the audience a little bit about you and some of the great work you do.
Sure. So I've essentially spent the last 10 years on the juncture of business and psychology, bringing a lot of amazing research from positive psychology, from organizational psychology, from neuroscience into organizations in practical ways. Like how do we increase the amount of happiness our people feel, and importantly, how that ties then to engagement and how that ties to how we do our work. Yeah, I mean, I know, I don't know how much engagement sort of, and the research around engagement is in your world, Mike, but so many organizations are measuring engagement and they're trying to improve engagement and they talk about it all the time. And, if you look at Gallup's data, the sort of gold standard for, for engagement over the last 20 years, it's only moved about 5% up and about 5% down from where it was in 2001. So we're doing something wrong. And when you look deeply at the research, what you find out is that engagement is actually driven by positive emotions, by people feeling positive emotions. And when leaders talk about engagement, unfortunately, they tend to talk about the incredible benefits that come to organizations when their people are engaged, right? They talk about increased productivity and increased profitability and happier customers and people that stick around. Or they talk about, what they want to see from their people. If you were engaged, then you'd be loyal and you'd be committed and you'd be giving going the extra mile. But of course, when people hear that, all they hear is, look, you just want me to work more without really paying me more money. So what's in it for me, right? And so if we can switch sort of how we think about engagement, instead of the benefits that are coming to the organization, but instead think about the positive emotions that actually drive engagement. And if we can think about engagement as part of happiness and activated positive emotions that drive it, that's suddenly we're realigning everybody and putting everybody in the same direction. Because here's the thing. Most people don't care about their engagement, but they do care really deeply about their happiness. So let's align those two. If you look at people who are engaged, they're feeling inspired. They're feeling enthusiastic. They're feeling proud. They're feeling like they belong and they're part of a team. They feel like what they do matters. So instead of focusing on the outcomes, let's focus on how do we increase that? How do we increase those positive emotions? And that becomes, that really helps everybody start pulling in the same direction, because we're talking about happiness and we're trying to do it. So the 7 strategies in the book. So I've got a book coming out March 9th, McGraw-Hill's publishing it. And it's called Put Happiness to Work. And it's got 7 strategies that are driven by the science, driven by the research, that are known to increase both happiness and engagement. So I guess that was a long-winded way of talking about what I do, but we need to focus on happiness and specific types of happiness in order to drive engagement, both as leaders and for ourselves.
Well, congratulations on the book. I'm looking forward to reading it. And as you were talking about, the happiness and engagement and all of that, a memory came back to me of an organization that I worked at almost a quarter century ago, which is downright alarming when I did the math in my head. So my original career was accountant. So I still can do a little bit of math, but I heavily rely on the calculator, but I use the one in my head on it. I'm like, how in the world is that long ago? But it makes sense. But anyway, it was for an a software company that basically did installations at client sites across North America. And our installation team would fly out to those particular client sites and do the installations. Now, typically, the size of our clients were such where we would send one installer, maybe two if it was a little bit bigger. But our installation department was about 12 people. So every week they'd all go out and we do anywhere from 8 to 12 installs. Well, this was in 1997. My good buddy Mark and my boss Richard we all, for some reason, had a cluster of installations in New Orleans.
Okay.
And they were all kind of scattered apart, but they weren't too distant as far as timing were concerned. So they floated the idea and they got all the way up to the CEO because it was a little bit out of the ordinary. But what they did was, for 1 week, we're sending the entire installation team to New Orleans. Now, of course, everybody thought we were going to be on, Bourbon Street the entire time. Well, not quite, but it worked out that way. And this is how it did. As an installation team, we were thrilled that they approved it. We're like, our entire team gets to go to New Orleans and work, of course, but we're also going to be together working in installs. And we looked at it and we're like, okay, now who's working on what? And we were looking at everything, and we basically mapped all the installations out because there were 6 installations going on down there. So what we did is said, okay, well, how long would it take to do all of these? And of course, we're all working together. We're brainstorming and all that stuff. We're engaged and we're having fun with it because our company said, yeah, go ahead and do it. So what we did is we looked and we went, all right, we're going to go through and we are all going to show up at this one client's first. We're going to notify all the others what's going on. So day one, there's 12 installers showing up at this client site. They were supposed to have 2. All of a sudden, 12 people came in. We told them, we're not charging you a dime extra. You're getting 12 installers because we've got other installations on and we want to get them all done. So we got that install done in a day and a half. And then the others we got done basically in another day and a half. So we got 6 installs done in basically 3 days.
Okay.
Now we're still there for 2 solid days. And of course, the cost to fly us all back or somewhere else would have been, and they didn't really plan for it. Like, we can't do it. It's like, well, you guys are going to have to stay down there. So every morning we would go and bounce around to all the Insight or all the installs and say, okay, everything good? Great. And then the rest of the time, we ate and partook in beverages and everything else that Bourbon Street has to offer. Number 1, we had the highest customer ranking from every one of those installs. They all praised us. We got letters of recommendation. We got acknowledgement from our CEO, everything. It was like the best ideal thing. And all we wanted to do was party. But we did. And we did. But we also got the work done really well. And it was creating a work environment that allowed us to thrive. To this day, there was no other installation that any of us did that topped what we did that week. But again, it ties into organization believed in us. Of course, they were hesitant and they're like, do not screw up, because we all would have been, getting, thrown to the unemployment line, and we didn't. We excelled above and beyond on. I got bonuses, you name it. It was an amazing time. So when you were talking about this, I mean, that was just one story that came to mind. And I started thinking about all the places I've ever been in those moments in time where the organization was like, I am thriving here and I love being here. And that's where people need to connect to and find that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Alexa, stop. Sorry, we had a family alarm that this is normally when I need to get my son up, but he's already, as I mentioned earlier, he's taking his driving test right now. So
hopefully he's awake. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully he's awake. Exactly. We are. So I mean, I think what's great about that is finding those experiences where something works, right? The team gets together, they're super engaged, and one of the neat things about having so much great research about what helps people be happier and more engaged is that you can find things I set up what's called the action buffet. All right. There are so many different habits and exercises and things that you can do. And you need to find, here's the thing, not everything, research shows that lots of things work and we know specifically what works. But what we don't know is what's going to work for your team there, Mike. We didn't know exactly what was going to work for you. You guys all had your unique experiences, your unique opportunities, your unique quirks, your unique personality types. And so one thing that's important is I talk about the action buffet because there are so many different tools we can try, but there's no one plan fits all. So you need to try things out, experiment. If you read through the book, you'll see dozens of different exercises and habits that are proven to increase both happiness and engagement, but you don't know what's going to work for your team. And so as a leader or as a manager, you need to figure out what sounds exciting to you. What do you think is going to work for your team? Maybe you even get a couple of co-conspirators of teammates that you're working with to be like that, are going to be excited about some of these tools. And you say, hey, what do you think is going to work for the team? What are some things we can try? And then guess what? You experiment, you try a couple things. Maybe it's a trip to New Orleans, right? Maybe it's bringing some things together or having some incentive that's there. And suddenly people are engaged and people are happy and they're enjoying themselves. Whatever it takes, but you want to have enough options to pick and choose the things that you think are going to work for you. And so that's an important, because there's a lot of great research. So what's going to be most appropriate? And you guys found it, right? So how do you do that without sending everybody to a different city all the time? But what are ways that you can find what worked for each of your people on that trip and find ways that you can emulate that more often, right? Because that's the key. When you experiment and find cool things, hey, dig in deeper. Do a little more of that. Make that part of your habits and your routines as a worker, in your teamwork, in your meetings.
And it's funny you mentioned meetings, because after that session, I was reflecting back what they ended up doing, because again, we were all installers and every week we flew out of either O'Hare or Midway in Chicago. So going wherever. But usually once a quarter, they would bring us all in to the home office and have a week of trainings and sessions, but also dinners and other things like that. And it just strengthened the team. And it got the attention of the executive of the organization, because obviously this organization had software developers and programmers and all kinds of other and support teams and admin and finance and travel and all those other departments. And those departments weren't gelling, but ours was. And they're like, okay, what is it? And it's like, well, because we had a strong director, we had a strong manager, and we had a team of dynamically different people that could come together and find some like interest to do some fun stuff, but also get the work done and be, great with the customers and all of that. So they were trying to emulate that through the other organizations, but the other departments in some areas they did well, but other areas they didn't, because they were trying to find the secret formula, which it really wasn't secret. It was just, okay, let people come to the table with some ideas. And if those people don't bring any ideas to the table, then there's a dynamic in the department. It's going to be okay. It might be a little bit more challenging, or just may not be natural for that department to do the same kind of things, but there's some other things they can do that they can enjoy their work and all of that. It's just, I don't want to say it's trial and error, but it's just like, okay, let's spitball this. And it's like, okay, what's some ideas? What are things you think would make it more enjoyable in your work? And that's a question that people need to ask themselves, not just managers saying, here's a meeting, we're going to talk about how to make things easier. Think about that. Come to the table with ideas and suggestions. And if you were so silly and wanted to run this department, what would you do? And that's a lot of people that aren't management think, well, if I ran this department, I'd do this. And then they get promoted and then they realize, ooh, wait a minute. There was some information they didn't share with me on how to manage. It's like, congratulations. Yeah, welcome to the jungle. It's a fun place. Yeah. But
I think one thing that brings to mind for me is when we talk about happiness, we need to differentiate a couple of different types of happiness. When I think about happiness, my definition includes, really, when I talk about happiness, it's like any positive emotion that you could possibly feel, right? So things like feeling content or satisfied, things like feeling joy, things like, any positive emotion that you enjoy feeling. That includes, I include that when I talk about happiness. And sort of in the research, we generally talk about all positive emotions. But when it comes to engagement and work, if you think about some of those types, you think about contentment or satisfaction or having things be comfortable or kind of easy. Those are what I call rest and digest kind of positive emotions, kind of happiness. And those are great. We want to have those, we want to experience those, but they don't necessarily drive engagement. So as you're thinking about what types of activities you want to do and what kind of things to bring, because you want people to be happier, but also because you want to get that alignment that I talked about earlier. How do you help people be more engaged? You really want to focus more on those, what I call activated positive emotions, that feeling inspired, that feeling connected with your people, right? Your trip to New Orleans, you guys all got to bond and connect over both the work and the social time, right? And you had time to hang out and do things besides just the installations. And so creating ways to find those connections and importantly, to make sure everyone knows that their work matters. Really showing, one of the strategies is authentic appreciation. Another one is cultivating connection with your team, finding meaning in what people are doing. These are all important ideas, and they drive those activated positive emotions, that sense of fulfillment, that sense of meaning in what you're doing, of feeling connected and supporting one another. And so there's not all happiness counts the same when we're talking about workplace happiness and engagement specifically.
Those are all great points. And, I was thinking about, even going back to that time with bringing everybody in, it dawned on me that there's a lot more people that are kind of in that boat right now where most organizations are still in this remote type of situation when they used to work together.
Yeah.
And those dynamics of having people with happiness and working in fulfillment, it's a different approach for organizations to basically seek out that happiness quotient or idea for their teams and their organizations when they're not physically in the same space. They're communicating over our smartphones or through a Zoom call or something like that. And it's a different dynamic. So what are some things you're seeing some successful companies do around that?
Yeah. I think on the macro, let's talk about the pandemic, right? We've broken all the rules that we thought we needed to do for work. Like there's so many organizations that know if you're not here, then you're not being productive. And so many different things that we've changed and we've had to change because we've had to adapt. So the pandemic has caused us to sort of break all the social scripts that were there before, break all the sort of unwritten rules about how things could work. And that's an opportunity. So as we are both still managing this virtual space, or for those of us that are, working harder because we're on, the front lines, we're essential workers, then there's just this intensity of the work. But no matter what it is, we've broken all those rules. So this is our opportunity now to build it back. And this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, I have to say, to rebuild how we work and to develop and proactively engage. What is work going to look like in the future? Let's do that. And let's bring the things in that we know are going to help our people be happier and more engaged. So let's be proactive about that. Now, when we talk specifically within this current stage, when so many people are still working from home or working remotely, there are a lot of activities that we can do. The pandemic has caused, even before the pandemic, there's a lot of people who are feeling really lonely in the world. And now we've taken away so many interpersonal interactions. And then when we have them, we're masked and we can't even see people's faces when we're interacting in real life. And then Zoom obviously has its own challenges. That's caused more loneliness, more sadness, more problems. And so we have a lot of opportunity, since we're still interacting with our coworkers in Zoom meetings and other things, let's make sure we're proactive about how we can make those. I guess there's 2 points here. One, have some of your meetings that are Zoom meetings where you're making sure everyone's on camera and engaged, and find some fun activities that you can do. One of the things I love to suggest is that you just have a meeting theme, that you say, hey, for this meeting, I want everybody to just put a photo of you doing your favorite hobby as your background, right? Or one of your favorite people in the world, or you can do anything. It's great to have these sort of backdrops because it just gives you a way to be creative. So having some activity, some theme to a photo before that weekly meeting, right? Have some way of sharing something, a fun activity that you're doing during pandemic. All right, let's throw that up there. Something that's interesting, just some question, some way to find some way of connecting. So utilizing those Zoom meetings, but selectively. Because the other thing is, once you've built trust with a team, you don't have to, there's a lot of Zoom fatigue. People are like, another Zoom meeting. We actually get a lot of really, especially once we know a team, we get a lot of good information, even if we're just doing it on the phone, even if we're only listening to people. And so don't feel like every meeting has to be a Zoom face on cameras meeting, but do some of those and make sure you utilize that time. One of my favorite activities, this one's a little quirky, so I'm going to just go out on a limb here. So, a friend of mine, Scott Crabtree, is the head of the chief happiness officer at Happy Brain Science, right? He does similar things that I do. He calls this the Pecha Kucha presentation. What you do is you just have everyone on a team pull together 10 photos from their life. Interesting photos, hobbies they do, things they do, and it can be both pre and post pandemic. It doesn't have to be all now, but like, what are the things that you are excited to get back to, or things that you're managing to continue? And you only have 10 seconds per photo, okay? And you do a presentation. So you pick one person each time you do this meeting over the course of a couple months so that everyone gets to have a chance. You put up your 10 photos slowly. You get only 10 seconds. You can't go deep into stories. You can't say, oh yeah, here's Bob, and we used to do this. So, but just enough to like plant some seeds about interest in things. And then that'll create seeds for people to connect later, right? That'll connect that'll allow people I didn't know that you were part of a band in high school. I didn't know that you like to play the piano. I didn't know that this was, that you like to go to these kind of concerts. Whatever it is, that can create those offline kind of conversations, offline kind of connections where you learn about other people. And that's an incredible way to start understanding the other people you work with. Yeah.
I love that. And I'm going to borrow it and completely give you credit for it and say, here's something you should do for people that I work with. It's like, just do it. It's like, right now, because again, we're separated in physical distances, wearing masks and all the other fun stuff that we've been doing for almost a year now. In some parts, we have been doing it for a year. This little exercises like that make a big difference. I remember an organization that I help out, one of the first calls. This is about a month into the pandemic when everything was locked down and quarantined and all that good stuff. Like, okay, we're going to have a team meeting. So we did a conference call. We didn't have Zoom at that point up and running. But basically, everybody came to the meeting thinking, okay, here we're going to give updates on what we're working on. Here's the status of this. And he said, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to talk what you're doing to cope with this pandemic right now. What are some things that are helping for you? And let's go around the room and share that. And those ideas help some people come up with ways to help them cope with the pandemic. And and that was it. It's like, well, are we going to talk about anything work? It's like, work's going to take care of itself. I said, if there's anything, send an email. We can jump on another call, but that's not the purpose of this meeting. This meeting is for that we are all here to help each other however we can. If we see something or hear something or an idea, or it's back when people were still trying to find masks or hand sanitizer and all that, or toilet paper. I was like, anybody, and it's like, every Christmas tree had toilet paper underneath it this year. I'm thinking, but don't throw it away, people. You never know. But at the end of the day, it all really helped, and I think that's ultimately when you have any type of these things, like, okay, let's just put human back into things and just Okay, how are things going? Here's this. And even going back to that, story that I said, I think it was in the pre-show or maybe during it, about me on the elevator with the guy with the dog. And, how he commented, it's like, you've got such a positive outlook on things. And like, that's choice. Yeah. And I choose that. I mean, it doesn't mean I don't have bad days or bad moments. We all do. But
yeah,
I don't choose to stay in that spot for very long. This is not serving me and helping me feel better. It's just causing extra stress. It's like, so let's focus on what I can do.
And what I love about what you're saying there, first, that meeting of having a chance for people to be human. There are a lot of organizations that are like, look, emotions are kind of messy and they're kind of, let's not bring them to work, right? And they're kind of like suppressing them or pushing them away and just like, oh no, that's a personal life thing. You're supposed to have your emotions there. But the root of the word emotion is motion. And so that's because emotions move us to action, right? And if we suppress those emotions and say, look, we're not supposed to be talking about our emotions at work. We're not supposed to be bringing that stuff to work. We miss on the biggest motivator, personal motivator for everyone for everyone on our team. So I love that even if it took the pandemic to do it, that they were able to bring that energy to the work. Like, hey, let's talk about the hard stuff. Let's talk about some personal stuff. That's okay. Now don't force anybody to have to participate in any of these things, and particularly when it's negative emotions, but give everyone an out. But if we can set the psychological safety of a room, if we can make it safe for people to participate and to share, it's really important because we get to understand and we get to share best practices, etc. And I love what you said at the end there that, we get to choose happiness. We get to choose our attitude, and that's absolutely true. There are times that we should choose to actually be sad and feel the negative emotions, but there are also times that we can say, hey, what do I want to feel right now? And what are some things I can do? And there are so many little habits and so many routines and so many activities that we can do that help remind us about the good things that we have in our lives, even in a pandemic, that those are important to try and to try on. And again, find the things that sort of work for us, that work for our teams, and then do them, experiment with them and try them out and move them forward.
That's awesome. So Eric, I've loved this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and this incredible work you're doing?
Yeah, thanks. So the website about the book specifically is called PutHappinessToWork, all one word, .com. And there they can learn a little more about the book. It also links to my primary website, which is erickarpinski.com. But they can learn about the book and a little bit about the 7 strategies. And importantly, what are some things that each of us can start to do for ourselves? About 80% of the book is about what each of us individually can do for ourselves and individually can do for the people around us. That includes our families as well as and our friends that we can see, and then importantly for our coworkers. And then about 20% of it is really about, as leaders, as managers, what are some ways that we can make sure and help spread that amongst our teams? And that's those 2 things are important. I think everyone's going to find some value in that 80% for each of us. And then the other 20% is important as we think about how do we take our organizations into this new world? How do we build this new world? The pandemic broke almost everything. How do we pull it back together in a way that's going to serve us, serve our organization's needs, and most important, serve our employees and their needs for happiness and for having ways to work with their emotions rather than against them.
That's awesome. I'll definitely have all those links in the show notes. So, Eric, thank you again for this amazing work that you do, and congratulations again on the book.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Mike. It was wonderful to connect.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.